I wanted to share some highlights from my Asia trip, visiting Tokyo, Seoul, and Taipei. John Moore of O'Reilly Asia was my host and took me around, took good care of me. This is the office at O'Reilly, and where they produce O'Reilly books, but make projects books here and some new titles. This is Gay Vertelli's 50 Dangerous Things in translation, and Mark's Made by Hand book is also carried by that office. I did a number of interviews, and this young man stood up and he had a make bag. He'd been to Maker Faire. Then went out to visit Gakken, the Japanese kit and educational publisher. This gentleman was kind to show us a lot of the science kits that they develop, including this steam engine kit. Then we went to, the next day, Mirai-Con, which is a science center for the Maker Conference. Hideo Tomura led it off, talking about a Fab Life book, and here I'm talking about the Geiger counter kit. My interviewer came back. He had these ears that wiggled if he was not listening properly. And the other kinds of talks were on money and music and the like. After the conference, there was a reception and dinner, and this particular one was some kind of heat sensor that goes over a ramen cup. And the next day, I was off to Seoul, and this is the Han River at the center of Seoul, and in the center of the city was Maker Faire in kind of an arts media building, a 4-story building that was an easy walk down kind of an alley. Ran into some Dan McSell, who started Hackerspace Seoul. He's a professor there. We had good signage out for the Arduino. And I like this What to Make machine, was a CNC machine. Make Korea signage and stickers were everywhere. And these students from the Chadwick International School had a bubble machine, and I was talking to their teacher. This man has a kinetic art sculpture, and then I was really happy to see Ji-Sun Lee, a former ITP alum, who's been to 4 Maker Fairs and exhibiting things like the Secret Tree. This was her young daughter exhibiting one of her things that you could make with a tech DIY kit that Ji-Sun Lee had on display. There was a maker shed and lots of merchandise, magazines, and our books in translation were there. Google was the primary or lead sponsor. Of course, there were this sort of a custom 3D printer that was made. On the rooftop of the building, there were a number of fun exhibits as well. So they managed to get indoor and outdoor space at Maker Faire Seoul. Afterwards, we walked to dinner, had kind of a traditional Korean kind of barbecue dinner with members of Hanbit Media, who are our partners and organizers of the fair there. Leaving, we saw this wonderful bud of light, and it was a temple that was lit up for a special holiday, and went over and visited that. This was the view from my hotel of the Namsun Tower. And then the next day, I had an interview, and it was James Powderly of Graffiti Research Lab showed up to interview me. That was followed by this rather less an interesting interview with somewhat of an airhead from an IT TV channel in Korea. In the evening, we had a maker set up this wonderful Dolphin mobile, and it was in a kind of a small theater. About a couple hundred people heard me give this talk, and here were there was one other fellow that spoke as well, and then this is the latest edition of Make Korea with Jake Von Slat on the cover. Then we left from the Incheon airport, which looks a bit like an armadillo, and then landed in Taipei. This is Brian Song and Amy, who work for Full On Publishing. They're our partners in Taipei. They took me around to some of the electronics area, where there were a few signs of Arduino and DIY in action. And this was a sign at a farmer's market. We couldn't quite figure out why they called it DIY. We went to really good seafood for dinner with Brian and his his father, Ed, who started his company. We had delicious abalone soup, and the fish were on display in the restaurant. This is a grouper, and Ed, Brian's father, is between John and myself there. The next day we had a bunch of interviews in a coffee shop. Gabi is a local Taiwanese term for a coffee shop. And these fellows from Sea Times interviewed me, and their most recent issue had published an article on the maker movement. Jason here runs a local TEDx in Taiwan, and he interviewed me and he moderated the program. This is the housing for a Makey robot. Brian made a few kits out of Taiwan. Then in the convention center, my talk was about 220 people for Make Taiwan, and had a pretty good crowd. All my talks are translated. This was in Chinese. These are a couple high school students that came up and wanted a picture. And this is Pei Wei. Pei and I worked together in the early GNN days. He was a developer of Viola. This is the 101 Tower outside where we were talking. It's the tallest building in Asia. And I got to the airport the next day at very early, like 6 o'clock, and walked by the lovely Hello Kitty check-in counter. So that's my trip.